you're going to see it all makes sense. Steve wasn't always the big shot here. He started out over in the BU math department when that was a tiny, tiny glimmer of what that math department is today. And as many of you know, he arrived here from MIT, bruised and battered, with great expectations. But then we actually returned from a Christmas break holiday, and he received a certified letter from Vice President Donor of Boston University that begins, well, I don't have that letter, I have Steve's reply. It was dated December 14. This is the beginning of Steve's reply and appeal, the beginning of a long series of appeals that he made on his own behalf. He says, I was astonished to receive your letter of December 14, in which you declined to make a positive recommendation in my tenure case because of, quote, the inability of reviewers to be certain of the direction and outcome of my research programs, and their lack of centrality to the development of the Department of Mathematics. Well, this was a shock, of course, but it turns out that in addition to, I was with him when he got this letter, and we were both in shock, but it turns out we were on our way to a family celebration with our new sound video camera. And so this actual day of receiving this letter is recorded. I'm going to spare you right now this because it's almost incomprehensible, but if you want to actually see this in the movies, you can. But I did grab some frames off this actual video of the day of receiving this terrible news, where we were on our way to a family dinner with Saul and Elsie, Ken and his wife Keiko, and Steve and me at Ken and Keiko's house in Cambridge. So these are stills, they're grainy, but you can actually hear some dialogue. A lot of it is gibberish. If you ever take family home movies, you know what they sound like. But I was able to listen. And you can extract some dialogue from this. You can hear Elsie saying, are they crazy? You can also hear her saying, if they like you so much, why don't they want you to stay there? And then, let's see, wonderfully, Steve in all of this hubbub turns right to the camera and says into it, today I was denied tenure for the second time. So that moment, instead of being merely in our episodic memory and anecdote, is actually on tape. Now his brother Ken, who's over here to the left, says, what are you supposed to say after that? This is all there, you know, it's not just me making stuff up. And then there's a little bit of hubbub, and finally things get off on a better track when Saul says, let's celebrate. And things went on from there. And you can see Steve yucking it up in some subsequent frames, etc. But truly, it was a terrible time. This began a terrible several months. And in fact, how Steve and I coped with this terrible time is not only enshrined in our memories, but it's actually recorded in the oral history of our field, Talking Nets by Anderson and Rosenfeld, an oral history of neural networks. Steve talked about this time, and he reminded everybody, well, first I wanted to show you, this is what happened to him, I forgot I had these. We had just been on holiday, he looked relaxed, happy, and these pictures were taken within 1 week of the other. I told you it was only going to get worse. But what really rescued us, in fact, was it turned out we had an old black and white TV, and they were showing reruns of old Francis the Talking Mule movies on TV, which we watched every day diligently. Francis somehow got us through it, and then when talking about this is a quote of Steve from the oral history of neural networks. When I was initially turned down for tenure at BU, there was such stress at the house that we would play games like Scrabble for hours, and we would watch, what is the show with the donkey? Well, it wasn't a donkey, it was a mule, but close. And you can read that and a lot more tidbits in this wonderful book that interviews many people, including Robert Heck Nielsen, who's here today. He has an interview in the book. Okay, this is sort of like watching Apollo 13, because we all know that as tense as things get, we all know it all worked out great. This is a blessed appointment letter from later that year, that long year, August 1977. They didn't quite spell Steve's name right, but close enough, where he gets tenure. And one interesting little tidbit, you'll notice that Vice President Donor, who just written him that terrible letter a few months earlier, is now interim dean of College of Liberal Arts, and as I recall, wasn't around too much longer, but anyway, he was not doing too well by trying to get rid of Steve anyway. But, so the big question is, how did this dramatic turnaround take place? Well, I know the exact day that it happened because I remember what we did afterwards, and which is we went to the opening of the then unknown movie, which has thrived as well as Steve has thrived here at Boston University, but we had no idea what we were going to. And this brings me to what happened. Steve's case wafted its way unhappily through one layer after another of appeal and due process, not going anywhere until he made one last desperate appeal to this individual who, back then, like all of us, was much younger. And he is somebody who, over the years, has become so famous for defying conventional wisdom that his name has achieved the linguistic nirvana of epithet. But I'll leave all of those decisions and ideas to the historians, but talk about this one decision he made to reverse his colleague and administrator's decision that day to keep Steve here at Boston University. Many hundreds of us would have had completely different lives if his decision that one day had gone thumbs down instead of thumbs up. So I'm pleased and honored and delighted to introduce to you today, if it weren't for Boston University President Emeritus John Silver, none of us truly would be in this room today.
I'm very pleased to meet Steve Grossberg's mother. I think that's wonderful that she could be here. I recall the delight that my mother had when I was appointed president here. I'd been fired to Texas, and she was very pleased about the comeback. The appointment of Stephen Grossberg was actually a transforming event in the history of Boston University and its development. When coming to Boston University in 1971, I appointed a series of ad hoc committees composed primarily of professors from other institutions to advise me to assess departments at the university, to advise me on weaknesses, on strengths, and to help in offering suggestions about what directions we might move in. As a result of those consultations, I became well aware of our perceived weaknesses, the way we look to other institutions, and the only people on those committees were persons of national and international reputation. I was aware then of what programs needed the most critical attention. The biology department was modest, but it was ambitious. The physics department was small and almost entirely theoretical. The chemistry department had no spectrometer. That's hard to believe, and its laboratories looked like something out of the 19th century. Willard Gibbs, a 19th century professor of chemistry at Yale, would have felt right at home with one of them. I couldn't believe that that it could be quite that bad, but it was. And so when I looked into the mathematics department, I found that it was far from the cutting edge, but these people were really open for improvement. It wasn't one of the departments that was second-rate and consequently resentful of anybody who was first-rate, lest they be exposed as being lower in the totem pole.